So let's talk about shredding a solicitation. I've got Amber and Lisa, two of my favorite government contracting professionals / nerds. Do you mind if I call you nerds?
We don't mind. We prefer it.
Yes, indeed. The floor is yours. It's 3 o'clock, and I've been telling people all day how excited I am about this. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Mute my horn here, and let's hear what you guys have to say about shredding a federal solicitation.
All right. Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Public Spend Forum, for having us. And that was a wonderful introduction, calling us government contracting folks and nerds. It's very apt. So we are Lisa Shaymont and Amber Hart of the Pulse of GovCon. We consider ourselves to be a boutique market intelligence firm that specializes in government contracts, in opportunity identification, and proposal management. So just a little bit of context before we begin. Amber and I are legacy proposal managers. We spent 10 years working in proposals. And so when we had heard from Frank and Public Spend Forum that they were going to be having a seminar on some of the components of government contracting and how to win bids, we wanted to get up on our soapbox and talk specifically about why it is so important to know how to shred a federal solicitation in order to set you, your company, and your proposal up for success. Because we know that all of the research that you can do before, every background information, having the best solution, won't account for anything if you are considered non-compliant when you submit your proposal response. So that being said, that is how we're going to begin and how we're going to move on. Let's see if I can move the slides. This is going to be a little bit of experiment. Here we go. So we have an objective today, and that's during this training session, we are going to run through a live exercise with a real world scenario where we are going to answer the following questions for you. The first is going to be, what is a solicitation? Because we need to give ourselves some context before we can continue. What it actually means to shred a solicitation, what the roles and responsibilities are, and why this is a complicated procedure. So Amber, why don't you kick us off by telling us what a federal solicitation really is?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Amber Hart. So Frank, I know, and Ben, and the wonderful people at Public Spend Forum have already kind of gone over a little bit about the different type of solicitations and procurement procedures. So I won't spend too much time on this, but really wanted to go over the biggest types of what there is for a formal package and what it means to have an active or an open solicitation. In general, that means that you are able to bid on that for award. So you bid and an award comes out of it. We've listed 3 different of the main types that we generally deal with, which is the invitation for bid, request for proposal, and a request for quote. And I know Frank already covered different other types such as micro purchases, OTAs, and those are different types of support as well. But these are the 3 main ones that when we talk about the traditional type of solicitation in government contracting. So let's see, I'm also, there we go. So as we talked about, there's a wide selection of different contract types. All of them very much deal with the degree and timing of the responsibility, the amount and the nature of the work, and what the government needs to get out of it. But for the purposes of this exercise, we are shredding a traditional request for proposal. Awesome. All right. So Lisa, do we want to talk about a little bit about what's included in a traditional RFP?
I think we do. And so, you know, the reason that we're going to take time out of your guys' day to talk about this is because we understand that putting together a response to a federal traditional RFP is extremely time consuming and a cost-laden process. RFPs are large documents and they read like legal text and they have very specific requirements. We note here that most federal government RFP formats are mandated by the FAR, and it will help you to know how typical federal government RFPs are broken down into these sections. So on a typical RFP, you are going to have a solicitation document that covers Section A through Section M. For today's purposes, we're really going to be focusing on the bolded sections. Section C, the statement of work or performance work statement or statements of objectives. Section L, the proposal preparation or instructions, and Section M, evaluation criteria. Now, although it's mandated by the FAR, to have these sections in a traditional RFP, the content of each of them will differ, and the instructions on how you respond to them will differ agency by agency, RFP by RFP. So although we're going to be focusing on sections C, L, and M, I would like to say we're not telling you to ignore these other sections because they still contain pertinent information that will go into your outline more often than not. So like section B, supplies or services and price and cost, that's where you're going to find CLIN information. Typically an RFP will have information in section G, which is the contract administrative data that you'll need to respond to. If your proposal requires an administrative volume, you might have to answer section K, the reps and certs. But since we only have a limited amount of time, we are going to be focusing on C, L, and M. So just
Perfect. So
more context, Amber's going to walk us through the proposal response preparation overview.
Absolutely. So I know that Frank, and during this training prior to us went on, kind of had their own type of life cycle in the way that you look at the different types of competitive responses and how you deal with it. This timeline that we've created here is really how a proposal manager, Lisa and I, approach a timeline of an active RFP. You have the final RFP release, which means the agency put it out, the proposal planning stage, which generally covers those three main items, the proposal preparation stage, which is a whole bunch of movement and writing, the post-submittal stage, which is where you're making sure you're compliant and compelling, and the proposal award where hopefully you win. But these are the four main stages or five main stages of responding to a formalized RFP process from a proposal manager's point of view.
So that brings us to today. For some more situational awareness, we are currently in the proposal planning stage when we talk about shredding a solicitation. If we had to define what it means to shred a solicitation, we would say it's to pull the pertinent response information away from the legalese. And it should be step one in any proposal response process. You need to read and digest the requirements in order to create a compliant outline. Why is it important to create a compliant outline? Your outline becomes your roadmap by which you structure your entire proposal response. It is imperative to maintaining compliance, by which we mean making sure that you answer every piece, part, mail requirement that has been listed in that solicitation. Because compliance is a butcher block and can be what separates the winner from the loser. If we can give you one piece of advice, it's to make sure that your outline, that you spend your due diligence up front, putting this outline together, shredding the solicitation, understanding what the government is asking of you. Because in the same vein, if you build a house without a strong foundation, it's going to crumble. So by shredding your solicitation, by building that outline, you are ensuring that you have a solid foundation to move forward. I have seen people try to just start writing based on their institutional knowledge, based on, they're the incumbent, they know what this contract's about, they know, quote unquote, I'm using funny quotes, they know what the customer wants to see, and then they have to go back and triage and try to put all of that square information into a round hole that they've now built. So instead, we really say, hey, this is where you start off, right here. This is period, point blank, step one. So why is this complicated? It feels like it shouldn't be, right? Why are we making such a big deal about shredding a solicitation and building an outline? Is it by nature a solicitation just a set of instructions to tell you how to move forward and respond? You would think that, but there are some caveats here. So the first of which is that different agencies do different things, the same way that different families do different things. Although the FAR requires the agencies to follow the same basic principles, they add their own flavor within those sections A through M. And so, like I said, they can vary agency to agency. It should also be noted that solicitations can sometimes be multiple attachments. And although a solicitation contains the instructions, these instructions are sometimes scattered through large multiple files. So that's something to consider as well. And it's time consuming just to read the full RFP. I don't know about you. I don't know the last time that I've read 120 pages in an hour. It just simply doesn't take that short amount of time. It takes the commitment, and these are verbose documents, and they are filled with legalese. And so they deserve the time that you need in order to read through it to make sure that you don't miss something. Because we like to say, without fail, a proposal requirement will be found buried in that legalese. So that's why it's important not just to read the sections that we're going to cover today, but the whole document from A to B. But don't worry, we are here to help, and we are about to walk through the proposal outline process with you. We like to use the analogy that it can be like paint by numbers drill, as long as you pay close attention to which sections ask for which colors. So we're going to give you, again, the purpose of this exercise, a little bit of the background information. We wanted to find a real world situation and scenario to walk you through today. So, Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but these folks should have been provided previously with an old solicitation.
Hey, sorry. No, we actually didn't send that out. Sorry about that.
That's fine. You guys were not provided with this, but that's okay. We have all of the pertinent information pulled out, ready to walk through. But either way, Amber and myself had to go through and find, over the last 10 years of documentation that we have stored on our computers, an RFP that was going to be indicative of what you would see out in the wild. So this is the one that we chose. I gave a solicitation number. It is through the Department of Justice. And this one in particular is for transcription services. Now, the reason that we chose this is because it is a traditional RFP that sets up its documentation from sections A through section M. It is about the same size as an RFP that you would normally see. I would have loved to find something that was, less than 100 pages, but unfortunately that is just the way of the world. And we wanted the subject matter to be on something that wasn't necessarily IT focused, because it's a little more difficult to talk about systems integration versus transcription services or something on the softer side. So we found that RFP, and we've now walked through how Amber and myself, the order of operations, the method to the madness, about how we would start by outlining this solicitation for a proposal. So as said before, we are going to only walk through the pertinent sections of the RFP, since we're compressed for time, C, L, and M. And this is in the order of operations from our point of view. Order of operations is important, and so I'd like to harp on that a little bit. It's the same thing as in a math problem, where if you start going out of order, everything's going to get even more convoluted and even more confusing. So keep that in mind. So we're going to start off with section C. And as you can see on the right, we have a screenshot of the solicitation, what it looks like, how it starts out. Section C in this RFP is the statement of work. And section C typically describes what the government agency wants you to do or supply. So let's start with the introduction, right under C.1. We know that the DOJ has a requirement for transcription services to support EOIR. The contractor shall furnish all resources necessary to deliver typed transcripts of government-owned recordings of immigration hearings on an as-ordered basis in hard copy, electronic format, or both hard copy and electronic format. There we go. We have the crux of what the entire solicitation, of what the entire contract and the entire proposal is built around. So we like to say that the first thing that you should read in any solicitation is the government's statement of work. But please note that this can also be referred to as the performance work statement, which is the PWS, or the statement of objectives, which is the SOO. Section C sets the stage. This is the subject matter. That being said, we just read this information, but if you are shredding a solicitation, you are not doing anything with this information at this juncture in the proposal process. This is purely for situational awareness. When it comes to the first step of shredding a solicitation, you should find yourself here in section L. So you'll notice that we have two screenshots on the right here as well of the first page of section L and a table that is found in section L. Section L provides instructions for preparing and submitting your proposal, which is why it is the first place that you should start when outlining your proposal, because this is the instructions. This is saying, hey, this is where we start. This is how we want the information presented, how it should be organized. It talks about how you should format the documents, which, yes, is an important part of shredding a solicitation. Because when you're building an outline, especially if it ends up being what's referred to as an annotated outline, you should build your document to fit these criteria. So if it says it needs to be 11-point font, this, great. That's what it says in L. That's how your outline needs to be set up. It provides the deadline for questions and the proposal submission, which is hugely important. Not something that you would shred in an outline necessarily, but Amber and I have considered it best practice to put that into another piece of documentation so that you can track these kind of submission requirements. It gives you instructions on how to deliver the proposal and any other notices, conditions, or other instructions. So again, this is where we're going to begin shredding the solicitation. So let's take a look at these screenshots right here. You'll notice on the table that it gives you an idea of what the proposal volume and section names should be, the number of copies, and their page limitations. So we can see just right here at a glance that this proposal is going to consist of 2 volumes. Volume 1, the business proposal, and Volume 2, the technical proposal. You'll see that Volume 1 has 2 components, the business proposal and the pricing table. And Volume 2 on this table has 4 components, but really it's cut off, and we would see that in the solicitation, has 5 components. The executive summary, the management section, past performance references, the staffing plan, and then the 5th component is actually corporate experience. So now we know what a general structure of our proposal response is going to look like.
Lisa,
Yes.
before we move on, if we could just look at the page count numbers. It's extremely important when you are shredding your RFP to look at the page count numbers of what's included and what is not included. And this comes back to being compliant and knowing what you have room for and where you can include it. I just wanted to call attention to that as well, because we see a lot of people that want to just start writing, that want to, put it all over the place and just say, oh, we can include it here, or, if we include this here, go over this page count, it's not a big deal. It very much is a very big deal. And just because they give you maximums on what to write to, doesn't mean that you have to use up all of the pages. I know that Ben and Frank will appreciate that, but just wanted to include that little note.
Absolutely. Absolutely imperative. If you go beyond your page limitations, typically a source evaluation board will take the ancillary information and throw it in the trash. It will not be reviewed. So yes, absolutely. When you are shredding your outline, make note of the page limitations. It can also tell you, in a sense, how valuable, how important your response is to the source evaluation board. So we can see here that management is pretty hefty. We got 40 pages, whereas they don't want to see a 40-page executive summary. Not that you would ever do that, but you can kind of see how things are weighted. So now we're going to dive in to the requirements in Section L. So you'll see on the right that Section L.4.2.2 is all about management. And if you remember from the table, there are 5 components of Volume 2. Management is the 2nd component under the executive summary. So that's where we're going to be starting. So Section L will typically provide proposal must or shall statements. And these mean that they are requirements that you, the offerer, need to respond to. Sometimes these are overall probing questions to answer the government's needs. So let's take a look at the screenshot on the right for L.4.2.2 management. You'll notice that it starts off with a paragraph, just saying a contract of this magnitude poses many management challenges, such as urgent requirements that must be performed in a very short time frames, surges in required production levels, uncertainties regarding the required services, etc. Your customer, in this case, has just given you a pain point right off the bat. Hey, this is something that we've noticed. these are the challenges that we have. So they are requiring your proposed management structure to demonstrate not only an understanding of this environment, but also how the offer will ensure accurate and timely transcription services. Then it goes on to say the management section of the proposal shall include and address the following. Below the paragraph, we have 5 components, 5 buckets, if you will. We see it enumerated 1 through 5. We're going to be focusing for now on number 1. Number 1 states the proposed management structure and process and how they will benefit from this program, how work assignments will be assigned to contractor personnel, how pickup of materials to be transcribed and transportation of transcribed materials to and from the government site referenced in section F5 will be accomplished so as to negate the potential for lost or late shipments. That was a mouthful in of itself already. We're just under number 1. You'll notice that these have been grouped together, whereas they are actually different clauses and they're different questions that you're going to have to answer. So how do you build that out in an outline? We like to recommend that you use the government's numbering system here, where you are going to have essentially the same 5 buckets that they have presented, 1 through 5. But you are going to take the clauses and use them as a tiered subheader. So I'm about to show you what I mean. So here is a basic notional outline of what the proposal is building out to look like right now. If you remember from the L table, where it was asking about volume 2, the technical proposal, there were those 5 components, right? Executive summary, management, staffing, past performance references, and corporate experience. We were looking at L.4.2.2, which was all about management. And we just read that number 1 under L.4.2.2, which had 3 clauses. So here's how we did it. We took the first sentence of that first clause and said proposed management structure and processes and made it a second level heading. We took the other 2 clauses and made them third level headings underneath it. So you'll see that we started with 2.1, proposed management structure and processes. And then from there, 2.1.1, how work assignments will be assigned to contractor personnel. And 2.1.2, how pickup of materials will be transcribed and transportation of transcribed materials to and from the government. Now I'm going to go backwards for a second, because there is a temptation here, since these are independent clauses and they don't seem to fit underneath one another really neatly, that some folks might have been 2.1, the proposed management structure and processes and how they will benefit, 2.2, how work assignments will be transcribed, and then 2.3, all the way down through 2.10. But that's not how we would want to do it in this case, because the government has these 5 buckets, and anytime you can use the government's numbering schema, the better it is for the reviewers to evaluate your proposal.
And Lisa, if I could also throw in something in there too, something that's also extremely tempting is to shorten or use different words for what the government is giving you. You know, let's take up that really long last sentence in L.4.2.2.1. How pickup of material to be transcribed and transportation, blah, 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 blah. It would be really tempting to not use the government's words and maybe shorten it. But we really discourage you not to do that, even if it takes up a line or 2 or 3. And it's because the government uses sometimes word finders, keyword finders, or software to find specific words to help them go through and compliance check documents. That's because sometimes they're getting 300 to 400 RFPs or bids all at once. So we encourage you to use the government's words in all of your subheaders, because if you don't, they might have a hard time finding and checking for compliance.
Absolutely. In that sentence in particular, you can't really know what the key word is going to be. What if they search for the word accomplished and that's what you've dropped? What if it's negate the potential for lost or late shipments? Absolutely, Amber, completely agree. Okay, so now we're back to this basic notional outline where we've said it before. We have 2.1 as the proposed management structure and processes, and the other two clauses underneath them. Since L.4.2.2.1 is a multi-part requirement, but we consider the multiple parts to connect to each other, they should all be mentioned under the same second level heading, under 2.1. In the same vein, 2.2 might be how the offeror will manage simultaneous work assignments, where workload and priorities may change. But for now, we're just going to stay here in the 2.1 section. But that's not enough. We can't just follow the instructions. I should have also mentioned at the beginning that another reason that we chose this RFP out of all of them is because we wanted an example of a really convoluted request for proposal. Something that had the right setup, but where things didn't match nicely, things weren't necessarily working out the way that we would have liked when doing a simple outline. This one truly is a thinker. And so it's not enough just to look at section L. You have to look at section M because that outlines how the agency is going to assess and evaluate the proposals it receives. This is the method by which they will evaluate you, and it's essentially the yardstick by which your proposal is measured. So on the right here, we have a screenshot of section M, the evaluation factors for awards. They start out, they give some general conditions, they give some award criteria. A lot of this is kind of just the overview of, okay, what's their methodology going to be in awarding a contract. But what we really need to look at is here on this next page. Once we get down to M.2.1, they give us the technical evaluation factors. And so this one right here is all about management. And it states, the government will assess each offeror's understanding of the proposed contract and ability to manage the contract in an efficient and effective manner. Okay, that's fine. The evaluation will take into account the offeror's management structure and processes, key personnel qualifications, and resources. The government will evaluate whether the offeror possesses the required facility clearance. Oh, there you go, better have that. The government will evaluate the proposed equipment that the offeror proposes to utilize to perform and the offeror's plan to maintain the equipment. The government will evaluate the offeror's phase-in strategy. The government will evaluate the offeror's ability to direct, monitor, and control multiple assignments under the contract. And the government will assess the offeror's quality control plan. What a beautiful laundry list of a paragraph that is. Now, whereas L gave you 5 distinct buckets for management on what they wanted to see, M.2.1 just provides this number 1 management paragraph with a whole bunch of components thrown in here. So when it comes to shredding a solicitation, it is best practice to take the M and use it to supplement your subheaders that have been developed out of section L. Because although L provides the instructions, we know that this is how you're going to be evaluated. So we need to use the government's language where we can and make sure that this is incorporated in our outline as well. So let's look at this circled clause here. The government will evaluate the offeror's ability to direct, monitor, and control multiple assignments under the contract. Multiple assignments under the contract, that sounds familiar. It sounds familiar because from L, we had made the 3rd level subheading, how work assignments will be assigned to contractor personnel. And then in M.2.1.1, they say that they will evaluate you based on your ability to direct, monitor, and control multiple assignments under the contract. That sounds pretty familiar. So that's where we put it. We made it now a 4th level subheading under 2.1.1. Because even though the government didn't directly match the section L and section M clause in question, we can infer that these elements are a match since we're talking about assignments. And this is why it's complicated to shred a solicitation. because we have to make these inferences for ourselves, just based on the subject matter, based on the language that's been used to try to put this puzzle together. Now you'll notice, if you read through the rest of M.2.1.1, which we did, that the rest of it does not follow such a nice one-to-one match. Sometimes M is going to fit perfectly in with the L. Sometimes M, L, and C are all going to, sit and simmer nicely together. This is not that time. So this is an example, and it's not an uncommon example, of a mix that you might see in an outline of not only using tiered subheaders, but also using the information from L, from the paragraphs, bolded headings, tables in order to respond to these elements, etc. So we're going to now walk through what you're going to see in front of you here. Note that red italicized text typically denotes RFP instructions in an outline.
Hey, Lisa, this is Frank. I mean, I want to pitch in really quickly here and say that the way that you're outlining this is incredible. It is exactly the way that I would want to read a proposal when I was a contracting officer. Like I've written a number of proposals. I don't think we ever did it this way, and I think that's why we struggled so much. This is just top notch. I just wanted to call that out.
Thank you. That is definitely helpful to hear. Confirming, if you will.
Yeah, Frank, I want to hop in on that as well. I don't know how many times I put out, in my more than a decade of creating L&Ms, perfect, beautiful L&Ms, completely logical and never confusing.
Oh, I'm sure.
Really the pinnacle of what an L&M should be. How many times I put that out, and to my dismay, to get proposals in return that didn't follow my perfect outline. And so whether I was truly perfect or I just believed I was perfect, it was key that vendors return it in the outline that I proposed it in. And, when folks thought they could, give me a better version of what I had written. By the way, by the time that RFP hits the street, that contracting team has put in hundreds of hours in creating it and getting legal review and getting management review. So when the proposals come in with a new structure that seems like it's more logical, it is a big pain in the butt. So whether your folks are perfect like me, obviously totally tongue in cheek, I'm sure I made tons of mistakes in my career, but follow the outline that's in the solicitation.
I'm so glad that you said that, because just in our careers, especially as consultants, we've had a lot of government contractors come to us and say, well, it doesn't flow. The outline doesn't flow. And it's always that F word. It's like the worst F word in a proposal manager's vernacular, because it kills me. And what we always have to tell them is it doesn't matter if it flows. It is the instructions. You need to remember the genre of writing that we're working with. And like you said, the fact that this has gone through its own process, it's already passed legal's desk. This has been approved, and there's a reason for it. There's a method for the madness here. So you can't make up your own method and say this is better.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that vendors maybe don't understand is on big buys, when you have a source selection team, the government has decided it flows because it has decided how the team will break up the evaluation. Mm-hmm. So, from the vendor perspective, you think it's this one continuous document, but on the government side, I've got a past performance team and a price team and a small business participation team, and they could care less. Not only could they care less, I don't want them to see the other elements in the proposal, because I don't want them to start evaluating stuff that they're not supposed to be evaluating. So sometimes the rigidity and the lack of logical flow, seemingly lack of logical flow, is really about how it's going to be evaluated.
Exactly. So let's take a look at this just tiny portion of this notional outline And we will walk through the method of our madness and how we've put these components together. So we're back to 2.1, which is that proposed management structure and processes, which comes from L.4.2.2, number 1. In that L reference, the first line says that the proposed management structure and processes and how they will benefit this program. We've bolded benefit the program because we have to understand that whatever comes under here, that's really the crux of what we're getting at. That's the golden thread of the rest of the narrative, is we have to make sure we say how this is going to benefit the program. In the same vein, M.2.1 says that the government will assess each offeror's understanding of the proposed contract, and ability to manage the contract in an efficient and effective manner. The evaluation will take into account the offeror's management structure and processes, key personnel qualification, and resources. So from there, we don't want to add another numbered header, but we would maybe want to start this subsection with a bolded heading saying understanding of the proposed contract and ability to manage the contract in an efficient and effective manner. We'd start there. From there, maybe we'd put in a feature and benefit chart. We all love feature benefit tables, and there's a reason for that. And this way we can hit on the government's requirements and language. So if you'll notice in M.2.1, they ask about the offeror's management structure, processes, key personnel qualifications, and resources. So why wouldn't you have a feature benefit chart right up front that shows that your features are the management structure, processes, key personnel, and resources, and on the other side of that, the benefit of each of those features, since the crux of this section is how it is going to benefit the program.
And
from
Lisa,
there, yes.
I was going to say, if I can interject, again, this is playing the game. A lot of you might be looking at it and saying, well, that's just a lot of headings, that's a lot of tables, that's just like, that's too much administrative stuff, you don't need to be doing that. This is playing the game, and exactly what Ben said, using the government's words repeatedly. So when someone is compliance checking this in a source selection board, they see the words that's required and they're able to just check off the list. And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Exactly. And so then we move right into that third level heading as we were looking at before, how work assignments will be assigned to contractor personnel, supplemented by the M section, ability to direct, monitor, and control multiple assignments under this contract. And that is how we have put L and M in this particular snippet together. If we can go to the next slide, I think I lost control. Here we go.
There we go. So, as Lisa mentioned earlier, my favorite shade and our favorite shade is that responding to an RFP and creating an outline is really like paint by numbers. And so now we're going to talk about when it's time for you to freestyle with details with section C. And so you can see by our pretty picture here, right? The L is the outline and the instructions. Your section M are the colors. And now we're going to take a Sharpie and maybe draw in a few details. And before we go to the next slide, I just want to make a note that at the end of this, we've actually outlined the entire volume 2 at a high level so you guys can see exactly how we've approached the whole entire volume, because we know we're throwing a lot at you, and especially over in our webinar, this can be difficult. So we want to make sure you guys get the full picture. So I just wanted to throw that in there. That will be provided to you at the end. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so as we mentioned before, it can be tempting to outline your proposals according to the SOW or Section C, but do not do this unless it is specifically called out in Section L and M. And I want to say that more times than not, that is not required or requested, but sometimes it is. And so what Lisa and I don't want to do here is to have this into your head where, you know, don't ever do it. Make sure you always follow their instructions. And sometimes there will be a time where the government asks you to respond to Section C. and that's just the instruction. So that's when you do it. But some solicitations have extremely technical SOWs. Others, like this RFP, cover personnel requirements. So it really, as we said, depends on the bid, depends on the agency, as different agencies do different things. But even if you're not outlining by the SOW, that doesn't mean that you should ignore it. There are often supplemental requirements to help you build out your response to Section L. And I'm going to just run over my mouth. I'm not sure if you can see it. But just the scope of the contract, which is C.2, and then following down to the statement of work, which is C.3, and the program management. We're going to break down a little bit of this section and show you how it fits in underneath the sections that we were just outlining, and how you can kind of do your ad hoc sections by responding to the scope of work. So next slide. Okay, so in this case, elements of C.3.1 will fall under section L.4.2.2 management, which we addressed previously. So we kind of provided the section for you to look at for L.4.2.2 as a reference again. And the section that we highlighted was the proposed management structure must demonstrate not only an understanding of this environment, but how the offerer will ensure accurate and timely transcription services. Now let's see how section C translates under this. So you'll see in section C, under C.3.1.1, section B, don't make me say that 3 times fast, that there's a section for the contractor's program manager, who is responsible for all technical and administrative performance of all services required hereunder. The program manager shall be the single point of contact through which all contractor and government communications, work, and technical direction shall flow. The program manager shall receive and execute on behalf of the contractor all orders for work and technical direction as the core and authorized ordering officials may issue within the terms and conditions of the contract. All administrative support of contractor technical personnel required to fulfill the tasks assigned under this contract shall be the responsibility of the contractor. And as we mentioned in the sections above, there's a lot of inference sometimes you make when it comes to section C and section M. So if we put on our thinking hats and we wonder how this fits under, because talking about the program manager, executing the program management requirement, obviously is something that's going to need to be touched on in your RFP response. So how did Lisa and I fit this in? Well, we took that and provided the annotated outline to provide to either your writers or to yourself, because we all juggle multiple hats, to show where you should really talk about the roles and responsibility of your program manager. And we fit that under 2.1.1 on how work assignments will be assigned to contractor personnel. As you can see under C.3.1.1 section B, your contracting program manager is the one responsible for making sure that work assignments will be assigned to contractor personnel. So that's going to be the crux of your response under 2.1.1, and that's why we provided it under there. Okay, moving on to the next. Okay, so that was a very down and dirty way of shredding a solicitation, but we wanted to get to the moral of our story, that shredding a solicitation is a team sport. You can't count on one person's opinion, even if it's your own. If this RFP has showed you anything, that there are multiple ways to interpret requirements and inferences on where to address things. Lisa and I always suggest that before you continue on with responding to an RFP and finalizing an outline, and you begin putting in the hard work of writing your response, that the whole team, even if that's just yourself and one other person, agrees upon the outline, so that you don't keep going back and forth on where things should be provided or addressed. And yeah, this does definitely take some time. An outline is not created, within an hour or two. It should be a thoughtful process that you take in everyone's opinions on how things should be addressed and make sure that that's agreed upon before moving forward. And that moves on to outlining a proposal can be subjective, as people read requirements very differently. But make sure you're always taking a pragmatic approach to that. And as Lisa and I like to say, we are proposal literalists, and we definitely recommend taking that approach as you begin your RFP journey, when you're not guessing on what the government wants to see, but you are actually providing them exactly what they're asking for. And last but not least, because Lisa and I have gotten in many bickering arguments over what an outline should look like. Even in this one, we had a conversation. But an outline is never as obvious as you think. And having a discussion around that and looking at all of the attachments and looking at every section, making sure that you have and you're addressing all the requirements is the pragmatic thing to do in taking your time. But it's never as obvious as you think.
And that was probably the most efficiently Amber and I have ever discussed anything ever. So some options for more details for you guys too. If you have any other questions on shredding RFPs, solicitations, as Amber mentioned, we have the full notional outline for volume 2 already completed. You can do a compare and contrast against the solicitation. You can always watch episode 2 of The Shred on YouTube on our channel, where we take 10 minutes to laugh about the best practices behind shredding solicitations. And then we also do have a membership offering. We would be remiss if we did not bring it up because we're super excited about it. We just put out a new offering 2 weeks ago. And our offerings include everything here on the table to the right. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us on thepulsegovcon.com. So Frank, in Public Spend Forum, anything else that you want to discuss?
Hey, no, I mean, other than the fact that my mind is sufficiently blown, this is, I mean, I can see how you work through this in the formulaic manner that I think I ignored a lot when I was a management consultant. And it's why, you know, while I might have been a really good writer, I wasn't always asked to be on the proposal teams. Absolutely. I mean, this was incredible. This might have seemed like, you know, a boring way to go about writing, you know, something, but it's 100% the way that you need to do it. It is a compliance exercise. And I just love how you all put up this sort of mapping, like the H1, H2, H3 outline. Again, just worth the price of admission today.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to hear and we're happy to be invited. And Frank has the follow-up slides and the full outline. Lisa and I are able to be reached through our website or on our emails, or if you reach out to Frank or Ben with any questions, we are always in close collaboration with them. So happy to answer any questions or any follow-up that comes out of this. But thank you so much for asking us to be a part of this. And we hope this wasn't too confusing for everyone, as we know that shredding an RFP definitely is a skill that is learned, and it's not learned in a day.
100%. I mean, thank you all for taking the time. I mean, I know you put a fair amount of effort into putting this presentation together for our audience today. So I want to thank you, both Lisa and Amber, for doing that and delivering this. Sounds like I've already gotten into the Guinness. I promise I haven't. It's just been a long day. This really was incredible. McGumby has a question that I think I can handle, but maybe if you all want to listen on it. So the question is, and I think you answered it in the chat, but when you're responding to something like an Agile RFP, where they claim to leave it up to industry on how to respond, you know, do you recommend still responding as close, you know, to this process as possible? And I think, Amber, you answered yes, and I think I would agree with that. You use their words and language. I mean, you need to speak in the native tongue, so to say. And, you know, but it's the point here is the government has certain things they want to look at, and they have certain things they have to evaluate in that source selection committee meeting. And if you got to make it easy for them to do that, right? And that's why this outlining is important. That's why taking it literally is important. And yeah, I mean, you're not going to learn this in 50 minutes. You know, the two of you, Amber and Lisa, have probably decades of experience doing this between you. So, I mean, you're both 29 at least, I think, and probably younger. Probably opened up a can of worms there that I don't want to.
I was going to say.
Yeah, we'll put the lid back on that one real fast. But no, seriously, this is kind of that point of enlightened confusion that a lot of our audience might be experiencing right now. So, you know, use them as a resource. Check out the Pulse of GovCon. sign up for a membership. It's definitely going to be worth it. So, okay, that's all the programming we had. I want to invite as many questions as there are out there. This has been a great day. I've enjoyed it. It's been a lot of talking. I hope it was worthwhile for our audience to tune in. We will be recording this. Well, we have recorded this. We're going to be kind of cutting it up and putting it on our YouTube page, on our publicspendforum.net page under our events section. So if you want to go back and watch this particular last hour on the solicitation shred, I know I will, you can do it there. So stay tuned to your email. Ben, I don't know if Ben's still with us. If you have any closing thoughts, you can pipe in.
I think it was a solid day overall. I love this delivery method. And of course, I love the song choices that you had. Fantastic. And I really, thanks to Lisa and Amber, because you drove home the point that's most important for folks that are just coming to government contracting, which is the government gives you the outline, please mirror it back. That is how you're going to get higher ratings on your proposals. But overall, just a fantastic day. And like Frank said, make sure you go to the pulse.com and check out their offerings for the Pulse of Government Contracting. That is thepulsegovcon.com.
That's right. All right, so that's our day. We talked about the differences between public and private sector contracting. We talked about all the different people you'll meet. The places you'll go in this crazy GovCon business development world. Talked about who to talk to and why, what to say to them. Then we got into the challenges, the mistakes that all government contractors make when they're doing business and trying to get those deals. And yeah, we capped it off with this amazing solicitation spread. So that means we get to finish up, go enjoy a proper St. Patty's Day. And I think this is going to take us out. Y'all have a good one. Thank you to all involved. We hope to see you on the next one. Public Spend Forum webinars. Signing off. Happy St. Pat's.